Hello and welcome to my full game commentary on Halo Wars, a game in which you shoot the aliens and don't be afraid of anything, or whatever the ancient meme was. I will explain exactly what that means in practice as we go on. We'll look at all the interesting moments, and I will say all the things that interested me about it in this abridged Let's Play type of video. Before we start, a few words on what this game even is. Have you heard of Halo? This is the prequel to that, taking place even before Halo Reach in the timeline, I think anyway. Although I'm not sure if this game is canon, because I have partial reason to believe it isn't, if you want to really get fussy about lore consistencies, which I probably will later just to waste everybody's time. Essentially it's an RTS, but an RTS designed to be played on consoles or on controllers. And at first I thought, well, that's going to mean its controls will suck or something. But actually, the innovations made to facilitate that limitation are really quite good, I thought, and this game manages to do the unthinkable in its overall design to be similar to Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle-earth, one of the best strategy games ever made, insofar as it's really like normal gamer-friendly, but still has plenty of depth for strategy heads like me, but not too much that you get mad about it. With any luck, I'll explain what I mean by all this later on. As for the lore, we're some decades before the events of the Halo series, and if you don't know what those events are, the good news is it doesn't really matter at all. As the opening cutscene of the game extremely briefly touches upon, there is some gigantic war between humans and aliens in the future, and we'll be doing some RTS missions that will make up some small part of that. There is vaguely a plot and a reason why this military expedition in particular is supposed to be important. However, one big criticism I have about the game is that it does a bad job of telling its story, and I would imagine the devs didn't necessarily care that much about that aspect. But there's actually more of a story than meets the eye here, and as you've probably seen, they put loads of effort into making beautiful cutscenes and characters. I think for now I'll contain my lore rants and just say that this game does presume you know about Halo lore already. And maybe that's fair given how big Halo as a thing is. There's actually this in-game codex thing, which can give you some of the lore that the cutscenes and the game in general kind of assume you already know about. However, you have to unlock that codex by finding special pickups in missions. Perhaps the biggest question that the game doesn't address, or maybe just Halo as a whole doesn't address, is who the aliens we're fighting are, and why we're fighting them. Maybe it doesn't matter, but I feel like I recently played Halo Reach and Halo Combat Evolved, which is why I started playing Halo Wars, just because I was in a Halo phase, I guess. And I can't remember why we're fighting the aliens in those games either. They're just like the rival superpower to humanity in some area of space, I guess. One interesting point in the lore for me is that the aliens, the Covenant as we call them, and they call themselves because they speak English very kindly, are sort of like technologically advanced and special as you might imagine like a sci-fi alien race would be. However, humanity isn't like the underdog in a war. This isn't some like Independence Day situation. Like the normal trope would be the humans are outmatched, but we just win anyway because we're so special. But in Halo it's more like, well, the Covenant are physically weak. They have like minimal strategic knowledge or aptitude. They only really hang on because they have numbers and marginally better weapons, but yeah, still not that much better than what we have. And Halo Wars kind of includes this as a mechanic. We won't really be seeing much of this because we're playing as humans the whole time, but the Covenant units are basically worse versions of all of the human equivalents. And somehow I just expected it to be the opposite, so it's kind of refreshing to be like, well, yeah, the super special, technologically advanced aliens are here, but they're kind of silly. They've got limited numbers of actual soldiers in their armies. They lack, like, combat instinct, you could say. All of this is probably because, like, in the FPS Halo games, the Covenant were just enemies to shoot. They're just the enemy. You're supposed to absolutely slaughter them. So they engage you in melee and stuff when you have guns. They can't use cover. They flee sometimes and just get shot. And the little ones make weird squealing sounds, like it's supposed to just be funny to shoot at them, that sort of thing. And Halo Wars kind of takes this into account, in that you'll virtually always absolutely slaughter the enemy. You're expected to get hugely favourable kill-to-death ratios. Now that's normally the case in RTS games because you're just better than the AI, but here it's built into the lore, like the enemy are just worse than you. You've just got good value for money units, so like you just have the advantage. Handy. And the game leans into this. It doesn't come and ask like, can you defeat the Covenant? the game is also like, well, can you kill them in less than 5 minutes, or can you kill them without losing any units? These sorts of like things that would usually be relegated to challenge runs or something, it implements this as something to actually aim for. So winning isn't enough, you need to win correctly, and that gives you something to do in a strategy game where, generally speaking, you are going to win and you're expected to win. And it does this through a scoring system we'll see at the end of missions, and this system, at first I was like, well, I don't care, but then it ended up really interesting me, and then eventually became like an obsession. Welcome to what turned out to be OFID's Halo Wars Quest for All Gold Medals complete commentary. We're skipping right to the second mission as, well, the first mission's essentially you driving to the second mission, and this is where the plot gets started. The aliens have found an ancient thing, and we'd like to stop them getting whatever it is. And I guess we need to kill the aliens regardless of the reason, so overall it's probably worth just going over and stomping them out. Yes, the plot doesn't really need motivation to fight the aliens, because it can just be like, well, you have to pay rent and your salaried job is infantry sergeant, so go and kill the aliens. That guy Forge is sort of vaguely maybe the player character, in that they appear to generally be in charge. Despite only being a sergeant, as far as I know, there are only like 3 officers in the human army on this planet. So you're pretty much one of the highest ranked people, that's pretty good, but we do still have infinite supplies of privates to use in tactically advantageous ways, so we don't need to worry about that. The mission begins with a basic tutorial on how to build, and this is where my reference to Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle-earth comes in. You have a set number of build points around each base, with special build points for defense towers. And there are several possible base locations to capture on each map. It uses a radial selection system with an absolutely glorious full-screen menu, and this is where console-focused UI sensibilities show their advantage on PC, I think. Had this been a PC-only game, that menu would have been small and contained not much info. But since you're meant to be able to play this game on a screen you might be sitting a certain distance away from, everything's nice and big, and it tells you everything right away with no like big nested menus to go through or anything like that. It's just really nice. It's got it all. I always like this because I feel like a UI principle that I prefer is that you should go as big as you can with everything really, and if the menu isn't intended to be used alongside like the main map view, then it's fine to totally cover up the screen while the menu's open. And sometimes I feel like UIs are afraid to do that. They try and let you see everything at once, even though that doesn't have any utility in the game. Well, anyway, the praise is clearly rolling out already. What we're doing is spitting out Marines, our generic infantry unit, and dealing with the Covenant, attacking from the north, plus constantly dropping units in our base with air transports. This was interesting, I thought, because I'm a loser, in that the game actually puts serious pressure on your base in a mission that essentially is the base tutorial. And you can imagine a new player getting very torn here between going out and playing the mission and staying at home and just sort of being paranoid, like not knowing how many more attacks are going to come in, when they're going to come in, whether they're going to get more powerful, how big of an army they need to leave. I don't know, there are some like actual judgments you have to make early on, and I feel like the game doesn't really require that of you after this point, so it's kind of a bit of a challenge that's just sort of surprising to be in the beginning. Not that it's impossible to overcome or anything like that. If you just make a couple of base defense turrets, that will probably do the work for you and you can carry on. Well, we have moved out to do some stuff, and there is an enemy base to the north, so we'll go and attack that place. Another 2 things I wanted to randomly mention here is that the way you get money in this game is it comes in a constant stream based on how many supply pads you've put in your base. So the meta is going to be the more the better, unless you can't actually spend it all, in which case you need to instead make a building that can buy something like a barracks. The other thing to mention is the game has 2 hotkeys for selecting either all your units or all the units you can currently see. And I found that encourages you, I thought anyway, to have single groups of units doing all of the business and not doing something like splitting your army between attack and defense forces or different attack forces. On PC at least, you can do control groups, so I'll be using that. However, actually attacking with less stuff can make the game substantially easier in a strange way, so we'll see more on that later on. we've come across an enemy base, so we'll want to kill that off so we can make our own base there. And of course the meta here will be the usual thing: claim all the base points on the map as early as possible, such that you can get as many resources as possible out of the supply pads you'll be making there over the course of the stage. But there's another consideration: the AI does actually play against you. If you leave their bases alone, they will upgrade them and work through their tech tree, making rushing extra effective. But, well, that's no surprise, as broadly speaking, rushing is always the easiest strategy in virtually every strategy game. It's usually just a question of what exactly makes for the best rush strategy. And notably, I didn't use a very good rush strategy because I ultimately lost my whole army in the process of killing the enemy base. So, let's talk casualties, since that will be important for the whole run. Casualties don't actually matter in the strict sense, and usually you have unlimited resources and unlimited time. So if you spam enough marines towards the enemy, you might eventually kill them, and that's all very nice. But as I said before, this is a game that isn't hugely testing your ability to win, more so your ability to do it with finesse, and ultimately I really liked this aspect of it, and casualties is a big part of that, so you do want to actually avoid casualties, unlike I was doing in this stage. And well, we'll see me finding that out later, because the way in which you find out what you're supposed to do to impress the game is itself something that can be criticised a little bit anyway, so look forward to that boring criticism. Soon enough, I have 2 bases with enough money to do whatever, essentially. Most options are locked early in the game, so all I can really do is make a load of infantry and tanks and go at them once we're at our pop cap. The Scorpion tank you might have seen from the Halo series, what do you know, is on the field. That's a tank which is just like an anti-everything tank, a jack of all trades. Same as your infantry, they're also described as a jack of all trades. In fact, that reminds me, we do have a couple of points I wanted to make, and I guess they need to be made as early as possible, so while I walk around killing things, allow me to make them. First is a note on what I just brought up: unit balancing. I described these infantry and tanks as general purpose, and I do that because that's how the game puts them forward to you. The game does a good job of telling you when you make a unit what it's for, so it will describe its unit as like an anti-air unit, anti-vehicle unit, or general purpose unit, as it does with the Scorpion tanks, for example. I remember with the infantry, in the description it explicitly says that the unit is good against everything, and I thought that was actually a bit of a mistake in the sort of tutorialization of using this unit, because what I guess they mean to say is that it can attack everything, in that you can use marines to fight planes and things like that. Although that said, when they're fully upgraded, they actually probably are good against everything, so I might be complaining about absolutely nothing here as usual. Let's move on. Let's make the real point I wanted to make as early as possible, because this is the official point we have to make, because it's the law. The camera! Yes, it's time to complain about the camera in an RTS game, which for whatever reason is something this genre just can't conquer. They can never catch up with other genres on camera. Well, I say whatever reason, there actually are reasons. Probably the reason why the camera is too close to the ground, that being the usual complaint in this genre, is to keep some level of performance parity with console versions of the game. Maybe because they have multiplayer crossplay, or maybe just the parity was being enforced on principle. In almost every circumstance in the game, being able to zoom the camera further out would give you more control and make things more enjoyable, I think. There, I said it. I wasn't really thinking this for most of the game, like I kind of got over the camera being close to the ground, but that's partially because I actually found a solution that wasn't what the developers intended, so we'll see that in a second, therefore I won't rant too much about it, but I'm just laying this down here because it must be known that the standard mandatory PC Gamer RTS complaint has officially been made for the record, just doing my best towards maybe one day getting Supreme Commander-like camera controls into other games. I have to do my part there. We've filled out the gamer commentary paperwork by making that point. Now let's get back to the action. We eventually plough all our units towards the objective at the top of the map. It's the entrance to the thing the Covenant found, and while I don't believe the Covenant are quite sure what this even is, they certainly don't want us to take it, and they've rigged it to blow. You have to destroy this detonator before they do so, which implies there would be like a time limit here. However, I'm fairly sure there isn't one, so that's nice. As for what I'm doing, the answer is not that much, because I'm doing this in the most basic possible way. I'm just walking at them with tons of units. I remember being concerned that the game didn't allow you to attack move explicitly, and I got mad at this in Command and Conquer, so I was ready to do the same here. But eventually I realised the game is cleverly set up such that you don't really need attack move, allowing everything to be done with console-friendly one-button controls. To be specific, I mean that your units always attack everything in range, moving or not, and moving doesn't affect your attacks as far as I know, so you're free to glide around blasting with everything, and that combo means attack move as it's traditionally implemented, where units stop moving when they see an enemy and don't move again until everything is clear, isn't needed. And whatever fine control is lost there, I for one was happy to lose it, because I eventually came to appreciate the fluidity of these controls, where there's less micro between you thinking of what you want to do and making it actually happen. So what might be considered a limitation required by the hardware or something, I frame to you today as actually an innovation which does have advantages even when playing on PC with mouse and keyboard as I am now. But I think that's only because the game also lets you do tons of micro on each unit and play with their special abilities at the same time, so there's lots of stuff to do. This is a kind of point that's become a favourite of mine recently, pointing out cases where simplifying the game doesn't make the experience of playing it any less simpler because there is so much to do. In other words, making the movement controls more basic doesn't reduce how engaged you are with the game, because the time freed up by the movement simplification goes right into playing with another mechanic instead, that being microing the combat. It reminds me of my thoughts on StarCraft, where I was like, all this hotkeying and economy micro makes the game more complicated, but you'd be fine without it since there's still a ton of stuff to do, and it's ultimately a limitation that makes playing the game more complicated but not more complex. Another distinction I like to make in my rants: complication versus complexity. Complication implying that the same effect could have been achieved more simply if the design was more clever without taking anything away from the game. And I think the RTS genre is one where the endless freedom to act, and there being actual advantages to be gleaned by being really tryhard and micro-heavy, makes it the perfect genre for finding stuff like this and making this particular point. I was a little bit concerned at the beginning, and I ended up liking it towards the end. Well, while I was ranting, we captured the thing, we poked the thing a few times, and we found that it's some kind of map to some other thing. Are you following the plot? You'd better be, because the information I'm giving you here is probably more than the game actually does. Essentially, we're in some ancient civilization's ruins, and our characters probably know this, but don't find it remarkable enough, at least not to say anything about it. And indeed, there are these ancient high-tech marvels all over the Halo world, including the Halos themselves. So maybe it's normal to just sort of find these things and not have anything to say about it. But I'm pointing this out because if you just picked up this game randomly, you'd be given absolutely no mercy in terms of having a chance to know what's going on even slightly. You'd probably assume this place is a Covenant facility based on how the game's presented it so far, but it's actually a Forerunner facility or something like that. I forget what the generic lost civilization of this sci-fi universe is called. They've all got one, it seems. I suppose it doesn't matter for now. There's some sort of fight. I remember before just like, we got a problem here or something like that, like something kind of lame. It was all pretty good. And we go on to the next mission. Here the game has a nice change of pace after that full-on base building mission from before, where it lets you get used to microing a few units. The main consideration with this micro is the use of unit abilities. Most units have some kind of special thing they can do when you press R. The tanks like these shoot area of effect shots, called canister shots, for example. So we're going to be driving around this place blowing everything up, and I wanted to make 2 points about pressing R. No, I want to make 4 points about pressing R. I'm like almost moved to tears at how many notes I made about pressing R in this stage in particular as well. You're watching OVD's Game Grounds and you can't stop me. Let me vent to you about pressing R in Mission 3 of Halo Wars Definitive Edition. So point 1, it's a really easy key to press. That's it, that's the point. Well, not quite actually. What you don't have to do is select the ability, then target it as like a separate input. And this is another example of a simplification that makes things more fluid, I think. R is the only ability hotkey for all units, which means units can't have more than one ability. A simplification, right? But because there is only one, you don't need any system for selecting which ability the mouse is currently targeting for. So by pressing R, you are activating the ability at the mouse's current position instantly, and that's really smooth and good and game-feely, and another example of this thing I like to harp on about these days, which is reducing the number of steps or lag between you wishing to make an input and achieving or affecting something. So if you've got your mouse over an enemy, and you've got a tank selected, you just press R and the tank instantly fires off its ability. And I think they really have taken this low input lag thing I'm getting at into account in their design, because if you look very carefully, when a tank uses canister shot, it doesn't turn the turret before firing, which it does have to do with regular attacks. The canister shot just sort of no-clips out of the turret housing and blows up pretty much instantly, so I think they saw the value in essentially making a press R to cause an explosion at the mouse position mechanic. Point 2, this time it's a criticism. Here I am, clearly a pressing R enjoyer, living a superior life to the press ability hotkey click mouse fans, and hence I might press R even if the ability is still on cooldown. And what this does, I believe anyway, is function the same as a left click. So if you try to use an ability on a bit of ground while the ability isn't ready, the unit will move to that position instead, or if you're hovering over an enemy, it will start making regular attacks on that enemy. And I think it should do something else or nothing, because me pressing R to fire a canister shot really doesn't mean I want to otherwise move to the target or switch to the target for regular attacks. It's a simplification where things have got worse here. It did reduce my feeling of control, especially because if you want to really micro, you probably want to fire the canister shot instantly when it's off cooldown to maximize the amount of shots you're getting out of the ability during the mission. So you might spam R right before the cooldown ends, only to learn you're actually giving out loads of orders you didn't want to by doing this. So I'd rather it do nothing, or just pop up saying 1 second cooldown or something like that. They absolutely blew it. Looks like my days as an R enjoyer are already over. Now point 3, if you have a lot of the same units selected and you press R, they will all use their special ability at the same time. This is probably another victim of simplification, to continue undermining my own point from earlier. Generally speaking, you will have more than one of a unit type on screen or in a control group or something. So during your micro, the path of least resistance when it comes to using a unit ability is to make them all do it at the same time. And that's going to be wasteful, it's going to be overkill, it's going to leave you covered in cooldowns so you're not ready for some emergent threat. And I found myself wishing for some way to be like, only one of you do it. For all I know you can do this, but I'm imagining like pressing the R button would by default only use one instance of the ability, and you do something like Shift R if you really wanted all your tanks to canister shot the same target at once, for example. I suspect they were unwilling to do something like this because of controllers, where this R thing is just like the Y button on Xbox, and they weren't brave enough, I guess, to add some 2-button combo into the mix and there'd be 2 different ways of using this control. I think keeping a 1 press per use paradigm would be fine even there though, because if you actually want to throw 5 grenades from 5 different marine units, for example, mashing the Y button or R key 5 times is both easy enough and kind of fun, and it makes some kind of intuitive sense, I think, that if you mash 5 times you get 5 explosions. It's more mechanical and immersive of an input even, like a hard and fast 1 press equals 1 effect rule means 5 presses equals 5 effects would seem like a natural extension and even make you feel more skilled for doing such a thing, I suspect. While the R enjoyer just wants to press R even more times, it seems. And I think I might have a real point here even. Point 4 about pressing R. There are enemies on the screen, okay? There are enemies of different types with different strengths, and so far you actually might be forgiven for not really noticing that. We're firing at purple blobs for the most part, and we don't have clear feedback on what they're doing back to us during the chaos. So while the game does do an amazing job of telling you the pros and cons of your units, the enemy's setup is only given the same treatment if you go into skirmish mode and read the equivalent explanations on the Covenant UI, which I eventually did actually, so we'll get to that. But while playing here, I didn't really know what I was shooting at, and in this mission you're given the side objective to kill 50 hunters, and the game mentions you can use the R-key canister shot ability to kill them quickly. And it appears to work quite well. Here's the problem though. The tanks you have on this mission are actually special tanks. Yes, they're only seen in this mission as far as I know, and they're able to overcome the weaknesses with this use canister shot against hunters strategy. Because hunters are actually, as it turns out, extremely good against vehicles, but because of this side mission I came to adamantly believe that the counter to hunters in the game was to deploy tanks, mainly meaning the weaker Scorpion tanks, so you could unlock canister shot and blow them up. And essentially, because in the FPS Halo games, using Scorpions to kill brutes is really effective, that was even more reinforced in my mind already. So I'm just laying here the foundation for the utter failure you're going to see when I find out how using Scorpions against hunters actually goes, and I'm wasting your time laying this foundation because I want to deflect some blame onto the game design itself, and I think my solution here is have the side mission be like kill 50 stalkers instead. Don't have like fighting hunters be the goal of the tank mission. We pretty much skipped mission 3 there, but we'll see it again, and here's why. I was staring at the score screen after getting the silver and thinking, I can definitely do that stage faster, now I know what to do. I wonder if that will get me the gold. I was thinking this wrongly, you might note, because I already have the maximum casualty bonus and almost the maximum time bonus, so just playing better won't make much difference to my score. But I didn't know that and tried anyway, so as I restart this stage and play it faster to see what that does, I'll explain how the scores work, because I was infected with this high scoring bug and it ended up being a big deal to me. You have a base score plus a base score multiplied by casualty bonus plus base score multiplied by time bonus, or if you prefer, base score times open bracket casualty bonus plus time bonus plus 1 close bracket. And I do prefer that because I'm a loser. The casualty bonus is between 1 and 10, and presumably you get it up to the maximum if you get a 10-to-1 kill-death ratio, or value killed to value lost ratio, something like that. The time bonus is between 1 and 5, making time less important already, but the game does tell you what time you have to get the maximum bonus. So the base score, that's based on how many objectives you complete, meaning the real way for me to get more points here is to complete more side objectives. One of those was killing off the hunters, the other is something to do with making enemies fall into a pit in the middle of the map by deactivating a bridge. You can see me playing here in a deliberately slow way actually, not keeping my force together, risking more casualties in order to try and fight more of the enemies spawning on the edges of the map to get that hunter side goal ticking along. It's actually better and safer to grind out the hunter kills at the end of the stage, so this isn't how you should do it. The point is, we see the beginning of a running theme where often, to get the maximum score, you don't necessarily want to play optimally or in the most immersive way, you've just got to work the objectives, whether that makes the stage harder or slower or more lossy as a result, and still get by. And I enjoyed that challenge as it turned out, so we'll see more of them coming up. The mission itself is very simple. You just go to the top of the maps with your tanks, giving you control of the Marines and the hero units, and then you just go back to the start. This would be very fast if you weren't hanging around to grind for kills, effectively. When it comes to this bridge objective, I did try and do it, but I couldn't really work out how you're supposed to do it. You might see me here trying to get our scientist character, Anders, to do something with the marked bridge control unit on the map. You're actually supposed to click on it yourself, and I discovered that by accident eventually while spam clicking some Marines or something. It brings up a UI that allows you to turn off the bridge, and once I discovered this I was able to just about kill like one grunt, the lowest form of enemy. And that, as it turns out, is all you have to do. Like, they could have easily slapped on a kill 10 enemies with the bridge or something like that to make it more difficult. Just getting it to work at all completes the objective. So we scraped through there, discovering it at the last possible second. All very good. For the finish, I used the technique that I learned the first time around, and that is, while the mission implies you need to extract your whole army to win, you totally don't. Only Forge and Anders have to go back to the start. So I left my army just in a choke point, killing endless streams of enemies. And while we might have taken more casualties there, it did allow me to get more hunter kills, and we did grab the hunter kill objective right towards the end. So that all went pretty well, or did it? Actually, my time was barely better than the first time around, and I was a bit embarrassed by this because I was actually trying and I really thought I did do it faster. Not really. However, I did meet the side goals, and that's the more important thing here really, because it increases your base score, and your time bonus is just a multiplier on the base score. So you only really want to work on getting faster at playing if you know you can do all of the side objectives. Because we did, my otherwise pretty much the same as last time performance still nets me over 10,000 extra points, and we grab the delicious shiny gold, and the sight of that glorious medal now in my virtual hand must have meant something to me, because from now on I decided it was important to get all of these, hence welcome to the genesis of my all golds run. I don't usually do this sort of thing, or care about high scores and things like that. For whatever reason, in Halo Wars, I did. I think it might be because I detected I probably could get them without doing that much extra work. Well, that said, once I decided I was going to do this, I took my commitment to getting the golds quite seriously, outrageously seriously. I decided to stop playing for a moment, go into the skirmish mode, and practice. Mainly because I wanted to read all of the unit descriptions and stuff in peace. There is one big thing that I didn't learn in my practice, and in fact you might have spotted me making a certain major mistake already. I'm going to tell you what it was once I realized back in the campaign, as it's something slightly unusual about how Halo Wars works that makes a big difference to the macro. For now, let's comment briefly on the skirmish mode. It's very reminiscent of Battle for Middle-earth in that there are third-party armies on the field to prevent either side from rushing too hard. That said, rushing remains the easiest way to victory, and broadly speaking, whoever captures a second base position first from the weak third party will go on to win because of number go up. The enemy had gone tall, as they say, in that they built lots of buildings and upgrades, but had no units or map control. I even recall that the game actually tells you what strategy the enemy AI will use in skirmish modes. So it said something like, they're going to defend their base, we have time to prepare, via voiceover. A nice neat feature for coaching people on viable reactions to the AI's behaviour, which of course would have functioned somewhat as training for online multiplayer. Very nice. I did come back to skirmish mode again to test out something, which we'll see later on. I also, while I was poking about in the menus, took a look at the lore system. I mentioned you can unlock lore by finding things in stages. We don't really have much of that. Well, I found out a couple of things. Forge is a bad boy, and it claims that the human military is getting annihilated by the Covenant, although that's like 20 years in the future from the current spot in the timeline, I think. I guess my claims of the humans being so powerful might be wrong. But you know, you see the Covenant and they really only fight with very short range, no tactics units that would be very vulnerable to the sorts of weapons humans use, like mines or shells. It's only that the humans don't use those things because Halo is about one guy slaughtering entire armies at ranges close enough to make it easy to aim with a controller. So there you go, console parity has crippled the humans in the lore. The PC master race can remain smug about that. Well, let's actually look at the next stage. That thing we saw the Covenant fussing over earlier turned out to be a map to a human planet somewhere, so we decided to go and find out what's going on. However, the Covenant also attack the planet at the same time, and we end up getting tied up trying to evacuate the civilians. This is Mission 4, the hardest mission in the game by an unusually large margin, I say anyway, so let's take a look and see why that is. Well, for starters, you're supposed to be given a load of air units to use. However, I didn't notice them, so we're playing only with Forge. So yes, I'm claiming this mission's really hard, but yes, my own sheer incompetence isn't going to help. I do think this is an unusually hard mission, more objectively speaking, especially for early on, so maybe we'll see that. First, we clear out a load of enemies who are attacking civilians here in this little square, using only Forge as well, but even with the Forge only challenge mode accidentally enabled, it's easy enough. And then the mission starts in earnest. Luckily, I did discover the 4 Hornet gunships I was supposed to be using already. We'll use them now to try and clean out some routes to 3 escape ships. The Covenant have units between where the civilians spawn at the bottom of the map and where they escape at the top. The goal is to get a certain number of civilians into the ships at the end of a time limit, but more importantly, you just have to not lose the ships during that time, and that proves to be what makes this mission so hard. The enemy will launch regular raids on the ship launch sites, often using air units. So while access to them from the ground can be cut off, allowing you to defend them quite easily, there will always be air units that will go around your army and get a few shots on the escape ships. And those ships are very weak, so you don't have much wiggle room for failure here. There is a secret that the game does hint at in this mission, as I recall, that took me a long time to learn and does make both this mission and the game in general a fair bit easier. And I'm going to save talking about that as well for when I noticed it, similar to the other thing I hinted at before. All of the Halo Wars secrets will soon be yours, I assure you. You saw me trying to save Ship 3 and failing miserably. We get a cutscene of it blowing up, and little did I know, this cutscene always plays, regardless of whether you do or don't save Cargo 3, which is extremely cheeky game design wise. Basically the game is slapping you across the face here, because if you commit your units to fighting over Cargo 3, as the ship is called, the position at Cargo 1 and 2 deteriorates, making the rest of the stage harder, and furthermore, if you delay the destruction of Cargo 3, you face a major disadvantage in that the game only lets you build things after Cargo 3 goes down. So the optimal route is to deliberately lose Cargo 3 ASAP to minimize the number of civilians who went that way, and unlocking your options for making bases and defending the other sites as early as possible, and I'll be using that knowledge in some of the inevitable retries that are to come. Once bases are unlocked, you're given 2 possible places you can put a base, and little also did I know, you're free to take them both right away, which obviously would help. If you only take the left-hand one, as I did, the Covenant will go and make a base on the right-hand position, and they also already have a base, with a load of unaggroed units defending it towards the right edge of the map. I eventually in this attempt went and took that second base site, but much later than I could have. The meat of the mission now is just frantically running around, dealing with the Covenant units all over the place. The Hornets dash around the map and shoot whatever I can see, and I gradually place bunches of Marines near Cargo 2 at least, so that one of the ships had something guarding it all the time. The Covenant have dropships that dump infantry at preset locations, and they always come into the map from the same places. So you can make setups that will take out most of these threats as they spawn, but we're far from that right here. This is my experience after having played this stage a million times coming through. As we saw, I lost Cargo 1 as well. We're down to only Cargo 2. Although, this is secretly good I think, because the chances are you are going to lose Cargo 1 at some point during the long 20-minute wait. And if you're going to lose it, you want to lose it as soon as possible. Same with Cargo 3, of course. We need to let it die early on so that more civilians go towards Cargo 2 and fewer are in Cargo 1 when it dies, thus increasing my final score or something probably. This raises an important question. Can you get something to attack ground, to forcibly kill the ships off yourself to make your life easier? I don't think there is anything in the game that can do friendly fire damage. Not sure about that, because if there was, I probably wouldn't have even noticed. Well, there's an inkling of a superior strat here, and like all good strategies, it involves killing civilians. Shout out to the YouTube algorithm, it's your boy OffED, wishing he could kill civilians. Let's get those keywords squared away onto this video's metadata, but it's all for a good cause, I assure you, the cause of me getting a gold medal in Halo Wars, no less. Now, let's talk failure. As implied, I did have to repeat this stage, and more than once admittedly. I got into a long-running battle between the second base position and the Covenant base right up against the edge of the map. Since they were harassing me with these long-range laser things called locusts, which were a problem. Along the way I did collect this skull, which are pickups you can grab to unlock various things that can make the game harder or easier. However, I literally never opened the skulls menu while playing. I think it's in the pause menu somewhere. And I didn't know what any of them actually did anyway, so I didn't make any use of that. making the mission deliberately harder can be used to get a higher score. So that could have helped me in my gold medal quest if whatever the challenge the skull added was easier to do than like an optional objective. Well, it's too late for that. We're not going to be using any skulls in this run. While I was distracted, off screen somewhere, Cargo 2 got destroyed by who knows what, and we failed that mission right before the end. In my second attempt, I committed the Hornets to focus on defending Cargo 3, thinking, well, it died first last time, and this is how I learned of the cheeky slap mentioned before. After several minutes with Cargo 3 unscratched, it just dies in the same cutscene as before, revealing how much I was wasting my efforts here. So after that, I'm back to firefighting and trying to capture that second base location after the Covenant already took it, which went worse than the first time. I think I took it later than before. There is a random element to these stages because the precise time at which various troop drops happen appears to vary, and in my anecdotal experience it varies so much that sometimes troop drops in certain places can basically not happen for the entire stage. And I think I will be able to show you an important example of that happening later on. It's hard to say what's going on, but this stage does feel kind of random, that's the point. After I set up that second base, I did make another big mistake that I'm going to explain later, just secretly making things harder for me in the background. We'll come back to that. I had also started to discover another secret by accident, although I hadn't fully understood it yet, and this is garrisoning. You might see around the place I've got marine squads placed on these raised platforms. There are certain things on certain maps that infantry can garrison into, which sometimes has a special effect, like granting you the effect of a building, and other times just turns the unit into a stationary turret, basically. The game mentions that units get a defensive bonus when garrisoned, as you might expect, but what I didn't realise is just how massive it is, and how it interplays with another, somewhat hidden mechanic actually, to spiral out of control in some circumstances. You can make garrisoned units redonkulously powerful, like more powerful than anything else in the game, in particular circumstances, and we'll see that later, more coming soon. My main idea was to focus on making more Hornets, since you can use them to react to the fact you have 2 bases and 2 ships to defend and the enemy are randomly attacking each position all the time. Having this fast flying army feels really useful, at least. I'd also cottoned on to the routes which the enemy flying attacks tended to use, so I could have groups of Hornets hovering in the relevant spots towards the top of the map to intercept the Banshee raids that were doing most of the damage to the ships. I did still lose Cargo 1 along the way, but this time Cargo 2 survived. My second base was being destroyed at the end, but, well, the nearer the end you are, the less you need a base. So let's just say that was all part of my plan. Victory is mine, we actually did it. However, I only got a bronze. My poor casualty ratio was mainly to blame there. I would have been losing Hornets and random marine squads just around the place in the chaos, so that's not very good. I also didn't do the final optional objective, which was to rescue a certain amount of civilians. I don't think I was anywhere close to it either. And here is where the real, high score madness begins to set in, because I could just play on through the game and maybe come back to this later, or I could just not even care. However, I went straight back in for a third attempt at Mission 4. Completing it with a bronze medal doesn't count as completing it anymore, as far as I'm concerned. We have to go back in and make it better. So we do another run, and, well, I had some ideas about how to make it better, so I probably just wanted to try them out. First idea is don't defend Cargo 3, as I kind of implied earlier. Just ignoring it is probably fine if the game's just going to delete it in a cutscene anyway. And interestingly, it gets deleted at the same time as it did in the run when I perfectly defended Cargo 3. Well, it's time for the second idea to try, which is the other thing I implied would have been a good idea. I just took the second base position right away. You can take both bases instantly once they're available. So overall, we're in a much stronger position than before. Can I do anything with this? I'll tell you the answer plain and simple. No, because it seems something came in and unexpectedly killed Cargo 2, even though I'm sure by now I did know where I needed to put units to stop this from happening. Maybe the timing was different to in other runs and I hadn't put the stuff there yet or something like that. Also, my second base was under attack and I wasn't defending that either. So that run seems to be just in shambles. Let's just push on, don't know what I was doing. I went straight back in and decided to find out this time what's happening with the Covenant base. I hoped that it would start small and build up over time, so that if you just attacked it immediately and ignored the initial objectives, you could take out some of it and maybe make the rest of the stage easier. It proves to be quite the opposite situation. It's rush proof, it's got tons of units guarding it, and it's all fully upgraded and stuff, so that doesn't go very well. I try again, doing the no defending cargo 3 approach, and this time we get something out of it. The cutscene plays about 30 seconds earlier than in the previous runs, meaning the way the enemy attack cargo 3 is random, and it's just that if they don't kill it, it always explodes at a set time, but they can kill it earlier sometimes. So in this run, I have 30 seconds or so of extra time with a base, meaning effectively a few hundred extra resources and more units out early. And you know, that's the first step on a positive feedback loop, of course, that's going to promise all sorts of difficult to describe advantages as the mission progresses. I believe I'd also started implementing the all-important ignore cargo 1 strategy as well. So we can put everything into defending cargo 2 from the beginning, and we'll hope cargo 1 dies as quickly as possible to get more civilians to go to cargo 2, as mentioned before. What I want is for the random Covenant attacks to mainly go for cargo 2 or the civilian trail, because that's the places I have to defend anyway. So I want to do all of the fighting there, just to keep things simple really. And there's another random factor while we're at it, which is the allied force on the map. The planet's own troops are fighting as well, and sometimes they do good, sometimes not. They have infantry garrisoned in certain towers around the map, and if the enemy doesn't happen to kill them early, that will help protect civilians until you get something better there yourself. But more importantly, they have several Spartans, super soldiers, who have the special ability to capture enemy vehicles. You might see, like here, there's this Spartan who's captured a Banshee and is using it to cut off the enemy Banshee attacks on cargo 2. That is extremely helpful, thank you very much. But it's basically different every time. Sometimes they take vehicles, sometimes they don't, and where they decide to defend with them is a bit random as well. Sometimes they die also. So it's all just something that could make this stage easier or harder in the background while you're not paying attention to it. More RNG to play with. The big thing I was trying to do differently for this attempt was to make a force of tanks and destroy the enemy base later on. In particular, take out their air unit production. This didn't really work at all. I didn't have any feel for how much power we needed to take down that base, so I was just sending things in and inspecting the fight to, well, try and get such an idea. We got pretty much owned while killing only a couple of things with most of the stuff I could afford to attack with, so basically it's probably not going to happen this way at the very least. And such a failed gambit does matter, because all the resources and attention I was putting into that were not going into, you guessed it, defending cargo 2. We actually do have 3 Spartans in the ideal position to stop cargo 2 coming under attack, although it doesn't quite work like that in practice, as we saw there, because the enemy attacks might just ignore your Spartans or ignore all of your units there and just go after cargo 2, and they'll probably get at least a couple of shots off before you kill them. So over time you can lose cargo 2 even if it's quite heavily defended, if the enemy choose to not fire at your units first. So I think you have to be a certain distance away to try and aggro the enemy away from cargo 2, like make sure they don't see it or something, I don't know. So we fail once again, and, well, should I just stop trying by now? Yes. Did I stop trying? Well, I'm surprised actually that the answer is no. I kept trying, this time with a slightly refined opening strategy. The idea is I was going to have Forge drive around the map before the first objective is done, collecting all of the spare resources, so that I don't have to do this during the start of the timer section. Meaning Forge will be able to do useful things like actually take out garrisoned enemies and defend the civilians and stuff. And for those of you following along with the exciting Cargo 3 Death Experiment data collection at home, well, here's the next data point to put down in your notebooks. This time we got it at about 17:45 on the clock, which is about 20 seconds before I think it's scripted to die anyway, so we've saved a little bit of extra time here by not defending it, but yes, not as much as the other time, just more evidence that there is a random factor here that can screw you over a tiny bit. It may seem like small amounts of time here, but I'm just worried because it's a positive feedback loop situation that saving 10 seconds at that early stage will grant you enough resources to perhaps put you over some tipping point later that will cause things to go much better, something. On this next attempt, I clearly regressed into madness because I was trying to defend Cargo 1 again. But then clarity strikes here because I come under attack from some vampires, and perhaps I'd cottoned onto the fact that they are the hard counter to my Hornets, so I ran away, as I should have done long before. A new feature used in this attempt was that I decided to bring out a unit we've unlocked for this stage but had escaped my attention thus far, that being the Wolverine. This is an anti-air missile vehicle, and since we know where the air attacks on Cargo 2 tend to come in from, we can park one of those in our blob of units over there to speed up the dispatching of the Banshees and Vampires. Soon we have Cargo 2 defended by a large blob that's able to defend against pretty much everything. We've got Hornets hovering both to the east and west, intercepting attack runs, and loads of static units, and occasionally I even remembered to garrison my infantry in stuff, but not always upon closer inspection of the footage. The real fight ended up being to keep my second base, as it came under heavy pressure towards the end. I could just abandon it at this stage. However, I need a good casualty ratio, and I'm sure that looks bad if you delete all your own buildings, which you do have the option of doing. So I needed to kill enemies, I might as well fight them here. However, because my force is then split across the map, I can't get very good engagements like this. I'd rather they focus all on attacking Cargo 2 again, as I said before. I want the fights to be simple, and our local advantage in numbers to be as great as possible, and it doesn't really go that way. So while I do complete the mission this time, and with a silver, it's an improvement, but not enough, really. I only just barely got a silver, scraping the bottom of it. I would need to get the maximum score from the casualty ratio, or actually get enough civilians for the side objective to even have a shot at gold here. And because the gods are sometimes merciful, I stopped trying. It is my pleasure to announce to you that I was out of ideas, essentially. I didn't have like a strong idea for going in and doing another attempt. Like, I thought that was as good as I can do. I just about got a silver. I guess I just suck. There were still more things I could do on that stage, and we will be seeing them, probably right at the very end of this campaign. We'll be back for more of that stage, so if you really liked it, don't worry, we'll be back. But for now, we go into Mission 5, which is vaguely a continuation of Mission 4. We're still in the same city, pulling off a simpler mission: go to a place, make a base, and then kill everything on the map. Reduced complication, but still enough complications that I did end up playing this stage a few times, as we'll see, and this is where all the lessons I needed to learn finally started coming through playing on this stage. So we're nearly beyond the struggle period now. We're coming now to the peak of my Halo Wars Git-Goodening mountain, so allow me to tell you what secrets I found up there. Now first I'll talk about something slightly tangential, because I just strayed dangerously close to saying something interesting or relevant. We need to dodge away from that, so I want to talk now about the camera. You probably noticed me getting into a tussle with the camera so far, and the official "the camera's too close to the ground" forms have all been filled out, so we've got that done. What I ultimately did about all that was look online, and I found some guy somewhere had an edit you could make to a text file in the game folder that changes the restrictions on zooming and camera placement. This meant I could zoom far further out than you're supposed to, and see a view that was more like what I wanted to see. However, I did also find this very often messed up the way the camera automatically moves sometimes to like peer around obstacles, or maybe the camera was hitting an obstacle itself, like in the skybox, I don't know. The camera doesn't work that well at higher zoom levels. You're not supposed to be out here. While I'm doing this all gold run, it's actually all gold brackets no camera restrictions, which is a slightly different category of achievement, one could say, because the game's just easier. You're not supposed to have this amount of finesse and control over what's happening. So when you can like micro two fronts on the same screen and select all your units really easily and see threats before they can see you, because normally you're looking at an enemy that would have been off screen and a normal, quote unquote normal player wouldn't have been able to see it on console or something like that. It's all making things a bit easier for me. So there you go. Although that said, now in my defense, I am actually playing on heroic difficulty, which makes the game harder. Allegedly. Let me give you a full list of the things that we know heroic difficulty does. So that's the end of the list. It's one of these difficulty modes in a game where, if you followed me, you know I have the offy grand theory of difficulty, which is that the overall quality of a game can be estimated based entirely upon what the game tells you about its difficulty levels. Not even necessarily like what the difficulty levels actually do, just what the game says they do. That's a nice proxy for how good the game's design is overall. Because good game designers make interesting difficulty levels and they're willing to tell you about it. Whereas cheaper game designers, true hacks, will just kind of do something for the difficulty level, and because they're kind of embarrassed, they won't tell you what it was. The long and short of all that is that the game is just cheating. So like that's what it has to be, the difficulty level. And from looking around online, trying to find out if anybody knew, there wasn't really a consensus on what the difficulty levels do, but the anecdotal experience from various people is that the enemy have higher health, they might have more attack, they might get more resources. It might be different in campaign versus skirmish what the difficulty level changes actually are. Broadly speaking, the game is just artificially harder via some sort of AI cheats in some way, and I can't tell you what they are. And by my grand theory, that means this game sucks, which is a shame because I actually thought it was quite good and enjoyed playing it, but I've just been informed by my theoretical counterpart that this game does suck big time and I was wrong to like it. Well, I don't know, maybe I just haven't found why the game sucks. Maybe the theory does hold. What I can't possibly do is admit that I was wrong in any sort of way. So we just haven't found the thing that's bad about the game yet. If you hate this game and have somehow watched this far into this video, let me know in the comments why this game sucks. That would be very helpful. So this mission is simple. All you have to do is survive a certain amount of time, although I don't think the game actually tells you that's what you're supposed to be doing. You've got a base, they've got a base, and there's a road between them, so the fighting is simple and linear, but you can take this side road to capture a new base position. It's defended by a mega turret, which handily glitches out here. Normally, it can rotate and kill anything that comes close. Here though, it killed a Spartan and then just aims at the Spartan's body for a long time, while my other units attack the turret. I think this is because Spartans don't actually die when they run out of health. They just fall down and then regenerate health until they come back to life. Same with Forge as well. Well, that's pretty handy, isn't it? The sort of thing that might be useful if one was trying to get a very low casualty rate, in fact. Well, we'll be coming back to this little idea shortly, of course. So we're shooting the turret and it has so much health it took 4 minutes in my recording to kill it. Well anyway, after a certain amount of time passes, the game just hands you loads more Spartans and then tells you to get busy. And basically this is enough Spartans to kill anything, so now you can just steamroll the enemy base, and that's going to be the end of the mission. However, I didn't do a very good job of this, because I also sent in my regular troops to help out. And in fact I had them at the front so they got shot the most. And riddle me this, what's best for keeping casualties down? Tanking with cheap, low health infantry, or tanking with immortal, high health infantry with a regenerating shield on top? Yes, we're going to have to make some slight changes here to get more of the points that I'm looking for. I think I just really wasn't paying attention to those details right there, because I was just thinking maybe I somehow had a good casualty ratio. Because you don't know it until the end, it's hard to guess how bad it's going, so I probably thought I was doing fine. But no, we come away with a sickening, shameful, disgusting, horrifying, mortifying bronze. My casualty rate was really bad, and I didn't do one of the side objectives, which was kill 5 tanks. And I immediately knew why. It was because I was using the Spartans to capture tanks, to use them. And that doesn't count towards this objective. So there's an easy idea to get more points, just don't do that. And of course, since we have more ideas and some foreknowledge now about how the stage generally goes, it's time to head right back in for another attempt. The main difference right away was that I wanted to secure the second base site before the first. However, you can't actually do it, as it turns out. The turret isn't there at first, and nor are you allowed to put a second base here. There is something here you can do that is useful, and that is capture this power plant that's barely visible underneath the road. This is one of these magic garrison buildings that gives you a special effect. I haven't mentioned what the power even does so far, so I might as well. You have a tech level, effectively, and that is called the power level. You can see in the top right where it's tech level 1. It goes between 0 and like 4 or 5, and you need to get it to at least about 3 to get all of the main stuff you're going to use. You can make power plants in your base to get this tech level up, but having one outside the base is better because it frees up a build slot, of course. You could have more money or just more build variety, in that having extra slots means you might be able to have a barracks and an air factory, so you can make 2 kinds of units and do something special with that. Since you get 2 bases on this stage, that's not massively important. Like 2 bases is enough to usually get all of the tech you need easily and all the units you want. Probably the most obvious thing to point out is that we didn't get the same mega turret glitch as before, so I made the same attack as before with just a few units, but it didn't just sit there doing nothing, it actively killed all of my units. However, we do somehow get the glitch to trigger again, or at least for one reason or another. The mega turret doesn't kill the second wave. It completely wiped out the first wave. The second wave just kind of sits there. I even just make my base in front of it and it doesn't attack me anymore. I don't really know what the rules are with this mega turret. Maybe if you have something really close to it, that's what disables its AI or something. My overall plan was to attack the enemy base before the rest of the Spartans appeared, hoping to get a below par time and hence the full time bonus, and also just to be cheeky. So I neglected my base defences and had a really scrappy defence over there once again, where I was probably losing a bunch of combat bonus points. But it was all for this attack here. I built up a large force at my second base, which can make the quick push towards the enemy base. This went unbelievably badly. I still didn't know that hunters, the big Covenant units you might see here and there if you look really closely, are anti-vehicle units, and I didn't comprehend how easily they were killing my tanks. I almost certainly thought the force I sent in there would win, and we achieved absolutely nothing, so my basic game sense was still pretty bad, clearly. It wasn't until the mission after this I found out how those hunter units even work, so we're not going to be learning the lesson here. But I made another attack using a bunch of Hornets instead later on, and this went better. I was able to defeat this base eventually, but I did it by ignoring a lot of the enemies and just force targeting the base buildings. Meaning I took a load of casualties and I was just feeding in more Hornets to the fight to keep myself at maximum pop cap the whole time, even going up to a higher pop cap because I unlocked the pop cap upgrade during the fight. Shout out to the guy power sawing his hedge outside my window. I'm already an hour behind schedule today, so the show simply goes on. This doesn't go that well in terms of my combat bonus, that's what I wanted to say. We do kill the base. We do it by losing loads of units, and it does not pay off in the slightest, because nothing happens. You have to complete this mission in the way that was intended, that being using the Spartans at the end. Very disappointing. I would have loved to see there be an alternate end to the mission if you did this yourself without the Spartans, but no, it's probably tied to some completion flags that require the Spartan cutscene to play and require the guy to come and say, right, all clear, which is what happens if you just run him to the empty base and nothing happens. They just declare themselves victorious and leave, thus completing the mission, so you can't really sequence break and get a better time bonus than what's normally on offer here. And we did not get a very good combat bonus as implied because we just lost stuff all over the place, although I did complete the kill 5 tanks objective, so we do get the silver. It was an improvement, but just nothing like the improvement I was hoping for or perhaps even expecting with that early kill strategy. I should note, in conjunction with that tanks thing, I stopped using the Spartans to capture vehicles at all for like the rest of the game as far as I recall, because it feels like they're much more powerful outside of vehicles even though they can pilot them, especially because Spartans on foot can be garrisoned, and that's going to prove useful in a second. The gods were not merciful this time, so I just tried the stage again, although the good news is that guy with the chainsaw has stopped for a second because his wife is screaming at him about something. It's all going well outside the window. Back in this stage, I was trying something a bit new, that being take the second base position after taking the first one, but before the turret thing starts. This allows you to see the turret being spawned. It kind of teleports down from space, it looks like anyway. And the good thing is that it can't attack you while it's teleporting down. I think it also takes more damage while it's being built as well. And then also, for unknown reasons, it just didn't attack me. I don't really know why. It really feels like this is a glitch, but it also feels like there's some intentional way here to stop the turret from attacking you because it could kill us, it's just not. Then I just remember that time that it did kill me really easily, and I don't know what I'm doing differently. Well, one thing that's going well here is I had the Spartan nearby, garrisoned in a tower, and that guy tanked loads of damage from all of the nearby units, buying me more time to kill the turret before it woke up and started working, I guess. So it all goes well, still for reasons I hadn't truly appreciated, which I just keep mentioning because at some point I'm going to actually discover this secret I'm alluding to. Well, my big plan was to again rush Hornets and then have them mainly defend. Now this works very well defensively, but I'm still doing it badly because having the Hornets go out front to lead the defense means the enemy aggro onto them, and they're very easy to kill. what I need to be doing is what I accidentally do here by pulling back to heal. The Spartan garrisoned just in front of them draws all the aggro, and you might note we've got something like 4 vehicles wailing on this one guy, and his shield is barely dropping at all. Spartans in Halo Wars are way stronger than Spartans in the FPS games basically, because they can take cover, which for mechanical and technical reasons wasn't invented in the FPS games, despite them taking place in the future of this timeline, and this really is the secret I've been missing. Spartans in cover are nearly invincible, and 1 or 2 is enough to hold the main base for the whole stage without taking any losses whatsoever, allowing you to have support units deal damage, do objectives, and get ready for the finish. In this case, I was doing this by pure accident, but again, I'm nearly discovering the truth to the garrison system in this game, and it wasn't until the next stage actually that I really discovered the secrets, so I'm still getting ahead of myself. We're nearly there. Now, I couldn't resist attacking the enemy base early with my Hornets, thinking I want to get it killed as the Spartans arrive so we can get that skip of the final battle. However, I failed. I just took casualties and didn't take down the base, so this was a waste, really. I think worrying about the time bonus isn't as important as worrying about combat bonus, because taking on risks to complete a stage faster isn't going to be a good idea, since the max combat bonus is higher than the time bonus and time is lost more slowly, or the time bonus points are lost more slowly, in that taking an extra minute doesn't really make much difference to your score, but taking, say, 1 or 2 extra vehicle losses might be doubling your overall loss count, halving your combat bonus. It's hard to say since you can't see the numbers while playing, and if you know me, I love seeing the numbers, but I'm going to let the game off the hook for this transgression, because you're not really supposed to be, gunning for good numbers here. It's just for the crazy freaks who have suddenly decided they have something to prove, which was me while playing Halo Wars for some reason. The story is that I got another silver. It was a better silver than before, but I still needed to essentially double my kills or half my losses to get the max combat bonus. Now, I've already described how to do that effectively. All the pieces we've seen already, I just hadn't put them together yet. However, before I would put them together, there was another, perhaps even more important discovery that I was destined to make. So now we're going to go on another side tangent. Yes, all this stuff I've been ranting about wasn't even the side tangent. This is the side tangent, as I went on a quest separate to the campaign to learn some stuff about the game, and I learned more than I expected. Guys, I just started commentating on this footage, and then eventually realised the mic wasn't here. I'm not very good at this. Well, here's what's going on, this time recorded on a hot mic. We're in skirmish mode, because I'm looking at the Covenant build tree and such. I mentioned this before as being a good idea, and this is why I think it's a good idea, because I did it, and it seemed to be a good idea. Now I have some information about what the Covenant units are like, and what buildings they come from, and things like that. Most importantly, I got to read the tooltips where it's like, this unit is good against buildings and stuff. So I had a bit of an idea of what I was going up against at last. I didn't fully absorb the lessons from that, as we'll eventually see, but yes, we're getting closer and closer to knowing what the Covenant units actually do. The big thing, though, is coming up right here. Sitting and staring at the Covenant base made me realise something, which is now being demonstrated. You can only make one building at a time. Why did I never notice this before? It's because when you make a building, like if you queue them up by buying 2 buildings at once, it will play the building animation for both. It will just only actually be increasing the building percentage of one of them, and then it switches to doing the other one once the first one is done. So you are queuing buildings, not building them simultaneously, and this makes a pretty decent difference in the early game. And that's why I was here in skirmish mode trying to find out what I'm supposed to do with this. It does simplify the potential build orders by giving you less freedom effectively, with the main consideration to make being that queuing buildings is a waste of resources because you invoke an opportunity cost upon yourself by not doing something simultaneously with those resources. For example, you can build and make a warthog at the same time. You can also, I later realised, make a turret and a building at the same time, which is useful. So now instead of the most economically powerful seeming thing to do with like 450 resources being make 4 supply pads, the truth is that making 2 supply pads and 1 turret gives you the same income at the same point of that second supply pad completing, but also the benefit of having a turret in the meantime, useful in a stage where your base comes under attack a lot. So I was missing out on something because of this. This is further complicated though by the matter of heavy supply pads. At power level 1 you can upgrade a pad to double its income, and crucially this can be done while also building another pad or another building, meaning you want to get a reactor out as soon as possible to get to power level 1 to unlock this economy build speeding up measure that can be done in parallel with other economy build measures, but you have to make the reactor at the right time because you need to be making enough money during the reactor's build time that when it's done you could afford to make an upgrade and another building at the same time to take advantage of this. But if you wait too late, you're getting less advantage from the potential of parallel upgrades to your economy earlier on in the stage, and that's losing out on some positive feedback loop bonuses. And yes, I was probably going insane thinking about that. So insane, I actually played a skirmish game. That's how insane I was. Truly off the rails. Man plays skirmish game in an RTS. Something has gone clearly wrong with the world's mental health. And after, well, only like 10 minutes actually of trying things out, I came upon something that I liked, and I was willing to just go with that for the rest of the stage, and we'll see I stick very rigidly to this plan I developed in this skirmish game, even when it doesn't work whatsoever, and we'll have some fun commentating on that of course. Now what I was doing was practicing rushing Hornets basically, finding a build order that would give you the income you need to continuously make Hornets one after the other with like no downtime on the air factory. And I think I did it, I forgot what it was, but it worked out. I was then confident that I could Hornet rush in any stage, and I was willing to do it in every stage, and we'll see that is going to become a problem essentially. The grand result of all this nonsense is we're back in Mission 5, we're feeling alive, and now I have a faster economy build than ever before. I can use my existing units to harass the turret and defend my base, while I pull off a Hornet rush with greater speed than ever before. For the turret this time, I built on what worked last time. I just had that one Spartan in the tower and nothing else. And that single guy can do everything. The turret won't shoot at the tower it seems, so he's fine to just sit there. And while some enemy units come and attack him, because he's basically invincible because of garrison shenanigans, he just takes everything out. I did also send a Cobra, an anti-vehicle unit that I barely ever made, and in this case barely even used when I've made it, because we don't need it, just that one guy just did everything for that turret battle. So again, we found a pretty reliable way to get through that part without getting wiped out by the turret. That's looking pretty good. Meanwhile, the main base was primarily defended by the two other Spartans, being right at the front. So this is how I realised their sheer invincibility. It was here really, because they were sitting there tanking everything. And even in cases where something was shooting at them from outside of their range and I didn't notice for ages, like you got so much leeway because they're so strong. You can sit there for 2 minutes not realising that tanks are firing at them, look back and be like, oh, they only lost half their health, go back and kill the tanks, their health just regenerates. I say health, I'm talking about shields actually. We've done it. Things are going much better than before, and it's a bit because of this build order practice I'm going on about, but I think really it's actually just the Spartans. Just having the Spartans always be as far forward as possible is the secret, because they just don't die and they kill units, which gives you a good combat bonus. And if you also Hornet rush, well, that makes it even better. The Hornet rush actually does come into account here because, as said, the Spartans can be targeted by things outside of their range like tanks, so being able to have a bunch of Hornets just go forward and shoot the tanks is really useful, as seen here in fact. Once the Spartans show up, I use them to absorb all of the damage, so this is the lesson I was trying to teach myself earlier in the commentary. Might as well have the shielded units that possibly don't even count towards your casualty rate if they die. Go in and absorb all of the main enemy damage from the stuff that's standing around the base and the turrets and stuff like that. Then we bring in the Hornets, so we see another advantage of using aerial units really. Air units are good for two main reasons. One being you can stack them on top of ground units to get more DPS, which is important in low-range RTS games like this one. The other thing is something a bit more abstract I don't really have footage for, which is that the Hornets have good pathfinding, and you can't say the same for most other things in the game. I just noticed that like tanks and infantry walk in the wrong direction and walk in circles and do all sorts of glitchy behaviours when you tell them to move. They don't fight very well as a result. So I liked Hornet rushing mainly for that reason actually. The sort of like DPS advantage in a low range RTS thing, that analytical sounding thing I just said. I guess that applies. I was aware of that after playing StarCraft and working that out, but yes, I really just wanted units that would do what I told them to. So that's the main reason I'll be bringing them out as much as possible. They're not actually that good as a unit, they're quite easy to kill, which means they're not very good for trying to get good combat bonuses, and we're just going to have to deal with, for some reason, becoming the Hornet Rush guy in a campaign where I'm specifically not going to benefit from doing that most of the time. Well, all that aside, we've got some victory to celebrate here, don't we? We got the gold. Not only did I get the gold medal score, I obliterated the gold medal score. This is almost the maximum possible score, like that was it. That was how you play Mission 5 in Halo Wars. The only thing I didn't do was kill the enemy base early, so you get that quick completion when the Spartans show up. That would have gotten me a bit more time bonus, but had it cost me any combat bonus, it wouldn't have been worth it, as I mentioned before. So I think that was pretty good. All of my work, all of my wasted time has quote-unquote paid off in that a game told me I'm good at that game. Thanks, game, we did, quote-unquote, it. However, there was one problem that arose after this. The next stage. The next stage doesn't let you do a Hornet rush. You can't build Hornets in Mission 6. And for whatever reason, because I'd decided that was going to be my signature style, when I hit this mission where I couldn't do it, I fell to pieces. So we're going to go back for one final struggle. So first of all, what is this mission? You might recall that the thing we found told us to come to this planet. We got stuck fighting the Covenant, but the Covenant have also found an additional thing and built a shield over it. So in our quest to see what all these things are, we need to break into the shield and find out just what's going on more broadly than I've described here. To do that, we only have access to a little bit of this map. The Covenant control the top half of the map, but you also can't go there, so things are simpler than they look. We're just hanging about on this dock area towards the bottom of the map. I was first exploring it using Forge and finding that out essentially, so things are easier than they look. However, what I can't do is rush Hornets, so I'm really stuck for what to actually do with my base. What I ended up doing is going with both a barracks and a vehicle depot and made a mix of Marines, Scorpions and Wolverines. Wolverines being the anti-air thing we saw earlier, because from the very beginning the enemy are spamming you with air units, and at first they don't have a base at all, they just spawn air units to attack you, so it kind of seemed like this was going to be a very air defense-y kind of stage. They will actually get ground bases in a second. Well anyway, I had a bunch of Wolverines is the point, and in theory you can use them to take down the enemy transport that constantly spam units all over the map, but well, it's harder than it looks, as we'll see. The goal is to move a special tank, the Rhino, to a special place. This is a long-range artillery tank, which you only get on this stage, and I didn't realise for a long time, you can use it as a tank. It is like a real unit. It's pretty useful as well, because it has longer range than everything else. So the way this stage is going is you have to do this 4 or 5 times, I forget now, and each time the AI kind of ramps up, and you have to defend each site until you've got 4 or 5 of the special rhinos in special positions. That will complete the stage. However, you might be guessing, so if the AI ramps up when you deploy one into position, the best thing to do is deploy them all into position at once, like right at the end of the stage, so the AI doesn't get all of the free cheats it gets when you advance the scripting. And if you're saying that, congratulations on reading my notes. Yes, this is for me to discover in the future. For now, we're doing this sort of as intended, where you just go and do each objective one at a time. We're now trying to push to the second Rhino point, but, well, it didn't go very well. There's this narrow causeway with a base at the end just pumping out infinite units, and we're really suffering there from the pathfinding paranoia I was going on about earlier and the lack of range. This situation is ideal for using Hornets, and that's probably why you don't get them to be annoying. Instead, you can try and go in with tanks, but they're too big to go down these narrow avenues, and will generally get stuck on each other and spend ages trying to decide who should go down first, and if there's like a marine unit nearby, they try to avoid running them over. You end up feeling really out of control, I found, and I just didn't like it. It was really frustrating to make such attacks, especially because it didn't work either. I ended up getting pushed back to the first Rhino position, thinking, well, I'll regroup and try again, but far from that, I was just struggling to hold my ground with enemies spawning in all over the place, and we're just in big trouble. And of course, we're now running into my obsession with using tanks against hunters. It started to become a real issue here. In particular, hunters are spammed a lot on this stage, and as I might have said before, my brain goes, hunters, right, the counter to that is use canister shot, the special ability of tanks, better bring out more tanks. So I was always grabbing the tanks the second I saw those hunters, and probably being frustrated when the result went one of two ways. One, the canister shot doesn't work, or two, the tanks and other vehicles died very quickly. Now, canister shot theoretically can kill off hunters. Indeed, that's why it worked earlier in the game, when the objective was to get you to do just that. Here though, we're facing the upgraded version of hunters. There are 3 tiers of hunter, and we're facing the 2nd and 3rd tier basically, and those both feature a shield. And that shield deflects frontal attacks, if you can even really tell what is a frontal attack in the chaos down there. And because of this, well, I ended up wasting a lot of money and time, because it does deflect canister shot and cause the canister shot explosion to just go off somewhere else nearby, not killing the hunters. Meanwhile, while you're sitting there with the canister shot on cooldown, the hunters will easily kill your tanks. So I wasted a lot of time and micro just trying to deal with that situation, and it didn't go very well. Also, the Marines can't really shoot through the shields either. I wasn't microing to be like, okay, I'll go behind them. I was nowhere near thinking on that level. I'm pretty sure I didn't know why my shots weren't killing the hunters at this stage. Therefore, we end up in trouble, although we do actually take Rhino 2, or Rhino 2's position I should say, by spamming Marines, as you might have seen, because the Marines, by all dying in the fight pretty much, were able to clear out the enemy enough for a couple of tanks to finish the job. So we've got 2 positions secured now, but all it's going to say is, right, we have to go and secure the 3rd position and then sort things out after that. And I was really struggling with the enemy's air transports, because they're just spamming so much stuff through these air transports. And they're harder to kill than I thought. Like, my big plan was, oh, I'll have my anti-air units just sit on the edge of the map where they're coming in and kill them off. You can't really do that, even after you get the upgraded Wolverine that has doubled fire rate. You need like 3 Wolverines to fire on 1 transport to reliably bring it down. And if 2 transports come in at once, even that doesn't work, and the enemy were generally coming in groups like this. Not to mention there is this other effect, which you might see here and there, it's hard to look for, where if you kill a transport just as it reaches its destination, it will still deploy all of its troops at full health. And as you might have seen, there is another problem as well. The 3rd Rhino site isn't accessible. You have to use your own air transports to go over there, which of course is going to limit what you can take logistically. And I was limited already by the fact that we're essentially fighting a 3-front defense. I have to defend a little bit to the right of Rhino 2, which is one place the enemy likes to deploy, on top of Rhino 1, which is another place, and the right side of my base, where I've got a captured power plant, because the enemy are landing troops in the fog of war where I can't see, little did I know at the time. So with all of that, I've got all of my units committed basically. We barely have PopCap to go and attack and secure another place, and not even being able to go there normally, having to use a special air transport ability to sort it out, makes things a little bit harder as well. I think I was very stressed playing this mission. It was all just a bit much. They've taken my Hornets away from me, and now I'm having to do this high micro thing where you have to defend AI-controlled Rhino units, and it's like, well, they're probably going to get themselves killed, or they'll die when I'm not looking, and my Wolverine plan feels like it should work, and it's not, and there's just so many free enemy units, I can't destroy their base to stop them from attacking me, they're just effectively cheating. A very frustrating feeling situation, basically. So moan, 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 complain, complain, complain. I'm just trying to get across my misery, because I remember also the satisfaction and how nice it was to eventually discover, you can play this stage in a slightly different way, using some stuff I probably should have learned along the way but really hadn't so far, and actually make it trivially easy and completely break and humiliate the AI. So please look forward to that as we slog through the next part of the misery, capturing the Rhino 3 site. That part actually wasn't so bad, because the game is generous here. While Rhino 1 and 2 sites are attacked constantly, Rhino 3's site won't be attacked after you take it. But of course, I didn't know that, so what's going to happen here is I've captured Rhino 3's position easily, but then I left a bunch of stuff here for the rest of the stage, expecting it to come under attack like the other ones. You are actually free to abandon it, and of course this is one of these things where you just learn it by playing the stage for the first time and then being like, oh, that's how it's scripted to work, so just automatically your second attempt will be better than the first because of knowledge like that. And well, it feels a bit lame, game design-wise, oh, you just had to fail, and no, that thing I've been complaining about recently on this channel, where sometimes I feel like it's kind of disrespecting the player's time to have there be some kind of gameplay challenge where you just had to see something happen and then attempt it for the second time in a different way based on what you saw. it doesn't feel skill-based in that way. Like, there was no skill way to know whether the enemy would be scripted to continuously cheat units in and attack that position like they did on the other ones. So, like, the mistake I made of leaving units there was kind of unavoidable. This feels like it's breaching the unavoidable damage rule, quote-unquote, rule of game design. All of this doesn't matter. It's one of these things where I'm conflicted, because, as I said, there is satisfaction to be found in seeing how the stage works on a scripted sort of level, and then being like, oh, here's how I can exploit it the second time around. But I also feel like it is bad game design because you were punished in some way for something that was out of your control, effectively. I liken this, like, analogously to, imagine a game where you're just walking to the right. Sometimes the floor falls down, and the game design's intention is that you will remember those places and jump over them next time, but the only way to know where they are is to walk across them and just fall down. So you have to fail to know how to not fail. That's a way of doing things, and I feel in principle against that. I feel like a cleverer game design and a more satisfying game to play would provide you with some way to predict what you're supposed to do, having never actually seen the problem in advance. This is something I think I was ranting about in another video as well. I'm probably talking about having the AI be really good or something. Like, I want to avoid there being scripted challenges that can be exploited, ideally. Well, not quite sure. So in this stage, an example might be you can stop the transports coming by doing something. Like, you can raid their base or make air units to go and defend out away from the land so they have no chance of landing troops. Something like that. I think what this might all be secretly coming down to here is I wanted to make Hornets in Mission 6 of Halo Wars. Yes, I think that's the real conclusion. Everybody scrap everything I just said. Just let me make Hornets, and then the game will be 10 out of 10. It is actually as simple as that. The game shouldn't have tried to make me care about the game. The game made me like and appreciate the game's mechanics enough that I wanted to be good at it, and because I wasn't immediately good at it, now I'm mad. And to be fair, I think that is to some actual extent the game design's fault. There really are some parts of it you just can't be good at until you've experienced bitter failure. I think, anyway, that's my excuse, that's what I'm telling myself. I had to fail to have fun, so this failure is part of the fun, guys. I'm not having a miserable time. All of this misery, this is part of the fun, guys. It's part of the fun. We're not coping. This feeling reminds me of, like, the Stockholm syndrome you get from playing something like Demon Souls or something like that. Like, if you've played the stormy part of Demon Souls with that really long, horrible run back to the boss, whose name I forget, the blind boss. Everybody knows what I'm talking about right now. There's, like, parts of quote-unquote good games that are terrible for really basic reasons. They're really unfun, they're boring, they're unnecessary, they waste your time deliberately. And there is this argument that, like, you have to suffer to really appreciate your final victory or something like that. Like, the game has to make you experience failure. So a game design where failure is required to succeed isn't necessarily a bad thing because of that. Because it enhances the victory, it gives you more suffering to recover from, enhancing the catharsis or something like that. I just secretly believe that all of that actually is cope, because there should be some way to achieve that same effect without having all of the negativity attached to it. I just feel like there should be. I claim to you that a cleverer game design does not require any particular failure from any particular player for them to feel like they avoided failing through their own skill and get that satisfaction. I feel like people who don't think that is the case, people who say yes, it is worth that trade-off, might have Stockholm Syndrome in the way that I have in my commentary right here about Halo Wars. What I'm saying is, my commentary is wrong. That's my commentary. Everything I have just said is a lie. He lied. And you work out what I mean by that. Now let's continue, shall we? All we need to do now is take down positions 4 and 5, CJ, which are the simple jobs of killing enemy bases on each position. Well, I say simple. The thing is, they're spamming hunters, I'm spamming tanks, it's still happening. We're still having the problem. It's also kind of hard because the approaches to these bases, while they're not that narrow, are narrow enough to cause pathfinding issues. It doesn't really look like it would, but I did have trouble getting the vehicles to drive close enough to the enemy to do the stuff. Probably for the best, since the stuff would have been die in that case. I come back with a better attack based on that attack I made earlier on base 2. We go in with infantry first, which will distract the enemy, get the hunters to probably be wasting some of their damage, and then I can make my attacks. I'm still kind of failing because I can't really get the vehicles into range properly. Well, at least we are seeing a successful push on base 4 at last. I'm using the special Rhino unit. I mentioned that you can actually use this, and by now I had worked this out. It deploys stabilizers and becomes this long-range artillery platform, which you can just take out the buildings with, so that's very handy. You can even do this to some extent with the enemy not aggroing onto you and coming out of the base to stop you, so it's pretty good. But we might as well rush in everything else and add more damage as well. So we've done it, we've taken position 4 at last. I did use a couple of Flamethrower units there as well, which I'll talk about more in a second. After all that, it's time to go for base 5, and I, being a strategic genius, thought, well, let's try that thing that didn't work before, because maybe it will work now. I would have done really well in World War I, basically. Another tank charge into the anti-tank units goes moderately badly, made worse by an enemy air landing happening right behind my force as I went in, so I'm getting attacked from all sides. This thing turns into a complete rout. And I know I was aware that my time and combat bonuses here are going to be so bad that I'm just going to have to play this stage again, so maybe that's why I was being laissez-faire and just trying things out and just trying to get something to work. I'm already doomed to repeat this stage, might as well learn as much as possible, maybe that's what's going on. Eventually, with what doesn't work thoroughly explored, I went back to what does work and just did the thing that worked against base 4 against base 5. It totally worked as well. And that was that, so what do you know? I think I was being so begrudging to use successful tactics here, because I really didn't want to use a plan that involved sacrificing infantry. Maybe I wouldn't be so good in World War I after all, saying things like that. The idea was I didn't want my combat bonus to be bad, so I want to have small numbers of high HP units. So I want to have tanks, even if the enemy are mostly anti-tank infantry. There is actually some logic there, even aside from that thing I was ranting about earlier where I'd learned to kill anti-tank stuff with tanks, which I guess was also the case. I was just trying to impress Halo Wars Senpai by going for gold. So I'll write to the families of those killed, reassuring them that, well, at least the commander who ordered their family members to get killed for minimal reason did get a medal for it. Well, that's nice, isn't it? Now, the whole point of the mission was to get all those rhinos in position to shoot the shield. The shield opens up, and you get this little Mac Cannon Frenzy minigame, where you're allowed to shoot the Mac Cannon a load of times, which normally it wouldn't let you do for whatever reason, and just blow up the enemy base. A bit of revenge for all of the enemy's spawning units, which were implied to be coming from that base. I'm sure they were actually spawning, because that's just easier. Well, anyway, very glorious. I do end up with a silver, despite a stunning 0 points on the time bonus, because I got a decent combat bonus, which was because I was killing millions of those spawning enemy units off screen, and actually getting a really high kill count. Therefore, my massive routs and failures were to some extent counterbalanced, and it ended up looking pretty good on paper. Again, all of the widows and such will be happy to hear that it does all look good on paper for me at the very least. We've got clear room for improvement. The World War I analogy continues. So I came back to make a better informed attempt. Just knowing how the stage works is going to make things easier. I can not defend position 3 at all, for example, and I can not spam tanks through the narrow parts. And I can get my Wolverines upgraded and out sooner to kill more transports and have to face fewer units overall. This, broadly speaking, didn't work, so I'm kind of skipping towards the end of this attempt just as it all starts to fall apart. It was all just a bit much, and I think I know why. It's because I really focused on making Flamethrowers, the unit I mentioned before, haven't mentioned really before now, and probably will never mention again, because of how badly it went trying to use them on this stage. Flamethrower squads are an alternative to Marines, which supposedly have some bonus against infantry. They're an anti-infantry infantry unit. My thought was I would get loads of these guys to kill the hunters, and that would finally be the end of my hunter arc. I'd have a way to kill them. I thought surely the flamethrower units are the intended counter to hunters, not the whole canister shot thing. I'm finally trying something a little bit differently, and it's going terribly. So once again, we should never go outside of our shell here. The problem you have with these guys is that They're a squishy unit that only has 2 models, so they're kind of easy to kill off. They have really short range as well, and combine that with pathfinding issues and just antics ensue. Like if they're part of a group and they need to attack the enemy, they'll probably get stuck in the middle of the group or will just walk up and down a lot and won't attack very much, so they really don't get their DPS potential. Meanwhile, they're probably getting shot by everything all the time, and I poured loads of resources into upgrading flamethrowers and making loads of them, and it really didn't go very well. The enemy started pushing me back and back, and well, I just wasn't killing the enemies like I was last time by spamming tanks, so I guess tanks do have some value to them. And we ended up straight up losing the base. I think towards the end I just stopped. I was just like, this is going outrageously badly. I just stopped trying. But part of the reason I'm under such heavy attack here is because I have half done the mission. I've got Rhinos 1 through 3 in position, and that means the enemy are spawning more things to attack me, according to my logic of it sort of being a ramping up process that happens on a scripted basis. Therefore, what do we do about that? Well, it's seemingly obvious. It's finally time to do the thing I've been hinting at now and again. We just need to not play the mission. We don't want the enemy to ramp up their attacks, so I'll just economy boom in the corner, not really do anything, and that works quite well. You don't come under much pressure if you just don't engage with the mission. Very handy. I aimed to get the upgrades for population cap and building speed as soon as possible, so a real tall build, but also I spammed a few units of Marines. At some point during my infantry attempt, last time probably, I had worked out there's quite a lot you can do with infantry on this map because various buildings are garrisonable, and many of these buildings are strategically placed such that they will cut off the enemy's lines of attack. And this, combined with that thing I saw earlier where garrisoned units are sort of invincible, gives you a way to take the pressure off your base really easily. With a couple of towers garrisoned with the cheapest unit you have, you can wipe out the waves in their entirety. 1 unit of Marines in a tower is strong enough to kill a few units of enemies and a vehicle or something like that. So that's all fine now. The only downside to this plan is that sitting back and gradually building up your economy and researching all the techs before doing anything takes 15 minutes, which is the par time for the level, meaning we're not going to get anything close to the par time by the end, of course, but I assure you this will still turn out to be twice as fast as the absolute mess thing I was doing before. Now, during the build-up, you might see some of the Marines in towers have level ups. Level ups, you ask? Yes, the stars over the units are units level. They can level up. The game never mentions this, I think, and it certainly never explains what it even does. Well, what we're going to do is speculate wildly here, because different people on the internet have said different things. It's one of these things where it's not known, but I did see some guy post a spreadsheet which they claim to have got from the developers, which essentially indicated that it does something different for every unit. So it's not like a universal bonus, but it's along the lines of you get very roughly 10% extra damage and 10% reduced damage, incoming damage, for each level up. So once you get to level 3, you're doing something like a third more damage and taking only 2/3 of the usual damage. It's something vaguely like that. So that's all very nice, isn't it? But of course, this probably stacks in a multiplicative way with being garrisoned. I would anecdotally say that being garrisoned reduces your incoming damage by 75%, some huge amount. So stacking on top of that with something else, we're probably only taking 10% damage on a unit that has 3 levels of veterancy in a tower. And being in a tower, sitting there easily killing multiple enemy units because they can't really damage you, is a great way to get experience very fast. The theoretical counterbalance to this is that your unit in the tower will eventually die and you'll lose your veterancy. However, with Marines specifically, you can get an upgrade which gives them regenerating health. You can also sometimes get an upgrade that changes them from Marines into ODSTs, which makes them really powerful, but I think you're not allowed that in this mission, so this isn't quite as powerful as it could be. But once you get the regenerating health, being in a tower just makes that unit functionally invincible. It's never going to take enough damage to die, because it's probably only taking 10% of the usual damage from attacks, and any damage it does take is being regenerated away. What I've got now are 5 or 6 immortal units positioned around the map in quite strategic locations. One of them is in where the 4th Rhino needs to go, and you can put them there before the enemy base has spawned there, so like later in the mission, once things ramp up, we'll suddenly have units inside the enemy base, things like that. And I'm going to do something similar with the second base position. Instead of moving the first Rhino into position, we'll first station units where the second Rhino needs to go, because the enemy spawns a base here once you complete the first objective. So if you're there ready to kill the base instantly before it makes units, well of course that's going to be the exploit we're going for here. That's going to skip over most of the fights, and it works better than I thought even. We've already done it at location 2, here's me doing it at location 4. We just eliminate the buildings instantly and they don't get to spawn any units, just skipping all of that stuff. Base 5 spawns at the same time as base 4 I think, so I wasn't there to kill it since I was doing base 4. However, I rushed over pretty fast and managed to kill it using, well, a very special technique. I rushed in my tanks against their hunters, and it worked. Why did it work this time? Because I believed. There is no spoon, there is no counter to scorpions, it's all fine. So I guess they just hadn't built enough stuff to actually overwhelm my terrible attacking force. Maybe there, it looks like I was using the Spartans a bit more liberally, like just having the Spartans at the front is the way to go, as discussed earlier. This might just be me putting all of those pieces together. We've seen all the pieces of what to do so far. I'm just doing them all at the same time, and it's working. Another thing to mention is that we saw just a second ago a bunch of banshees orbiting around one of my towers. You might have spotted that in the footage if you were looking really closely. This seems to be an effect of garrisoning towers. It glitches the way the banshees attack you, and they very often go to attack the towers but then don't, and further extending the glitch, once they're just sort of stuck hovering near the tower, your troops inside also won't fire at them, so both sides just get stuck in a standoff. Now that might sound bad, but it's actually good because, well, it might be good anyway. I think the enemy might be working with a pop cap, so if they have tons of units that are stuck, just glitched out, running around in a circle somewhere, that does reduce the amount of stuff they're sending at you ultimately. Not sure if it actually works like that, like they're probably just cheating and spawning units and well, I'm just wishful thinking here. It is my belief that in some way, a glitch you might have seen during that footage was also working in my favour. Optimism right here. What we had there was a very long calm build up where nothing happened, then I deployed the Rhinos to all 5 positions as fast as I could, and that resulted in skipping all of the hard bits of the mission. Plus we had that tower thing from earlier, skipping any pressure in the beginning, giving me plenty of time to prepare for all of that. It worked really well. We still got a terrible time score, but we come away with the maxed out combat bonus, so we do get the gold. I'm sure that you could do that strategy while building up less and being less turtley to make it happen faster, but we don't need to worry about that. We've got the gold at last. The minutiae of Mission 6 in Halo Wars Definitive Edition needn't concern us. That's one more world problem ticked off the list. What's going to happen now is something seemingly miraculous. I'm going to let you leave. Yes, we're going to split things up and return for part 2 next time, in which we'll see all of the stuff after this. The game is easier after this point, I claim at the very least. Hopefully I'll be able to back up that claim in part 2. And I think it's because the stages get mechanically easier, and there's just less bullshit to deal with effectively. So we can complain that it's too easy after having gotten bored of complaining that it's too hard in this first part, that'll be good. We can just point out the difficulty curve imbalances in some way and make a legitimate point like that, but we'll be framing any legitimate points as very illegitimate seeming rants/mental breakdowns. So that'll be good, won't it? Look forward to more commentary, more of the best, worst commentary in the world on the second half of Halo Wars Definitive Edition on PC, all golds, heroic difficulty, coming your way very soon. The most important media event of the millennium. Thanks for watching part 1. Let's see what drives me into a frenzy for part 2.